Hello to all you patriots out there in podcast land, and welcome to episode 270 of Canadian Patriot Podcast, the number one book review fan club podcast in Canada. We're recording on November 11th, 2020. Joining me tonight, we have Ian and Alan. As always, my name is Andrew. And tonight we have a special guest we'll be introducing in just a moment.
Hey, we'd love to hear your feedback about the show. Please visit CanadianPatriotPodcast.com/feedback or email us at feedback@CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. A version of the show is available on Stitcher and iTunes.
We need your help. To support the show, visit patreon.com/CPP and become a patron. You can get a better quality version of the show for just $1 per episode. Show you're not a communist. Buy a CPP t-shirt for just $19.99 plus shipping and theft. Visit CanadianPatriotPodcast.com homepage and follow the link on the right.
And I'm going to introduce our very special guest tonight. A man who needs some introduction. Someone who's written many books. Someone who I've listened to on many podcasts, not even his own. Glen Tate. Glen, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. This is great. I love it. I don't think I've been on a Canadian podcast before, and I live in Western Washington near Canada. And so I wanted to come on and say hi. And already in the pre-show, we've warmed up and it's been a lot of fun. So thank you for having me. Nice group you got here.
I'm glad that you like them. I borrowed them from another podcast.
Ooh. We call that poaching down here in the States.
See, we call it sharing. It's one of those inherent differences.
Right. That's cool.
Collaboration.
Socialism,
Yeah, collaboration, crossover. Yeah, it is socialism to an extent, but in a good way.
to an extent. Things that aren't socialism. Let's do my favorite segment. That's called What Are We Drinking? That's where we go around the panel and I ask what you're drinking. We're going to go clockwise and we'll start with Alan. What are you drinking?
This is Jura 12-year-old single malt scotch, barrel aged. Really hitting the spot tonight.
Good stuff. Ian, what are you drinking?
Well, as always, Uber Daddy duty calls, so it's some granite filtered well water from the Doomstead.
At least it's well water this week, not what come out of the tap.
Oh, yeah,
You
that
don't want
Quebec stuff
anything that
was
they put in
crazy.
the water that turned the freaking frogs gay.
That's right.
Glenn, what are you drinking?
I am enjoying what I've been drinking since I was about 12 years old, and that would be Rainier beer. I understand it's kind of a popular thing on some show. Walt Longmire, somebody was telling me about. Don't know anything about it. It's seriously what I've been drinking since I was about 12 years old. Very refreshing. Nice to like mow the lawn on a hot day and drink a Rainier or come on this podcast. So either way, I'm good. So yeah, there you go.
Right on. I kind of wish I had a Rainier because it's hard to come by up here. I'm drinking more homebrew this week, same as on Monday's show. More of the delicious milk chocolate stout, possibly the best beer I've made yet. We also want to remind everybody, if you're doing the social media thing still and you haven't been kicked off like me, go do your 5 things to be a better person, complete the Patriot Challenge, use the templates on the website, and complete your 5 tasks to be a better person.
Or just do
Get
those
into our
things and you can do it without being social about it. You'll still be a better person.
If you don't post it on Instagram, did it actually happen?
It's a question I've asked over and over again, and apparently the answer is yes.
Well, I'll take your word for it.
Oh, come on, Andy. You must have done that at some point.
I'm reasonably convinced that nobody does anything now that I don't see it.
The entire world has ceased to exist.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned.
Through the lens of our screens, right?
That's right. Let's go into our main topic. We've got Glen on tonight. We're going to talk about Glen's work and what's going on in the world and some American perspectives on things, I think. Well, Glen, if you just want to start with who you are and why we invited you here this evening.
Well, I'm this guy, and I wrote 10 books, 299 days. Some of you have read it. Some of you haven't. That's okay. That's cool. We're not going to get into like a big book review thing where it's like, did you see what happened in chapter 34? I can't believe that happened. And everyone's like, hitting the pause button and not watching. So it'll be a general conversation. 299 Days is a prepper fiction series, and it's different in a lot of ways, because It's about me, and I'm a regular guy, and I'm not like a SEAL Team 6 guy. I'm not that guy. I'm just a regular guy. And it's a story of a regular guy who prepares over a lot of resistance from his wife. That would be my first wife. There's a reason for that. And he forms up with his guys, the team. The team are real dudes. I can talk about that later. Everyone loves to hear about that because there's amazing collection of civilians who are really good at what they do. And a lot of people can relate to that, and forms up a community, and they do some good stuff, and they fight some bad guys. And I've just condensed about 3,000 pages and 90 hours of audio on the audiobook. So if it seems like I jumped through it a little bit and there are some gaps, there most certainly are some gaps, but that's what it's about. I had no expectation anyone would ever read these books. I couldn't stop writing them. I had never written fiction before, and sent them to one publisher, and I got this amazing 10-book deal. I was like, what are you? I didn't see that coming. And they became very popular. I think some number of preppers have probably read them. And I understand there's difference between preppers and patriots and all of that. So I'm going to kind of mix them up a little bit, but I do acknowledge some patriots are not terribly well prepared, and some preppers are not really patriots, but maybe we get into that. And it's launched all kinds of cool things. We now have a podcast, Prepping 2.0. I say we, my wife Shelby and I do. She's also a prepper fiction author. She wrote the 3-book series, A Great State, which takes place in Portland. So in 2016, she sends me this manuscript about Portland, and Antifa's out of control and the police won't do anything. And there's a bunch of wildfires. I'm like, quite a tall tale you're telling there, Missy. And it turns out everything she said actually happened in the time frame she predicted. But anyway, so there's that. And then we have that podcast, which is a lot of fun. We have so much fun doing that. And other things, let's see, I'm a lawyer, a solicitor. See, I'm bilingual. I can speak your language very well. Solicitor, and but not really a solicitor, just a regular lawyer. And I work for a company that does cool stuff that a lot of you guys, I mean, it's a cool company. Trust me, I don't do corporate stuff. And Shelby and I live out in the middle of nowhere in Western Washington, far away from the madness of Seattle. And we've really come to just really enjoy this life, and we get to meet all kinds of cool people like you guys. And it's just been a really good time. So that is the professional background. Shelby's my second wife. You probably deduced that. And that's about it. We have a son. She has a son, Joel, who's a character in her books, who's a real guy. And that's about it. I prepare and enjoy hanging out with people. What else can I say?
Well, let's go back to the books for a bit, because I don't know anyone that's just had it strike them that I'm going to write a 10-book series. I mean, anyone that I know that writes, most of them don't end up with book deals because, to be honest, most of my friends' writing is not particularly good. Mm-hmm. But I don't know anyone that sat down and been like, well, I'm going to just write 3,000 pages or however many pages all the books sum up to, right? And then go out and get that deal. So how did you arrive at that you're going to write not just a novel, but a series of 10 novels and then go about getting them published?
I didn't go about that. This is the Easter Bunny story. The books came about because of the Easter Bunny. And every time I say that, hosts generally who don't see this story coming start to think, did we just book a completely like insane guy? Has he had 18 Rainier beers and now he's talking about the Easter Bunny? We don't need that. But it was the Easter Bunny. When I was married to my wife, who was hostile to prepping, I prepped anyway for a variety of reasons. Like, it's a really good idea. And I saw all these things coming that are playing out now. And so I had to have, she's a feminist. And so I had to have an explanation for why I had prepped. And basically I had to have a story, for lack of a better term, for when stuff fell apart and all of a sudden all this stuff showed up in the garage. It had been in a rental storage unit that I was covertly storing. And so I needed an explanation. So I thought, well, I'm going to allow her to save face. That's the polite thing to do. And that's appropriate. It's effective too, that this juncture, if there's a big crisis, that's the worst time to be saying, I told you so. So I came up with the Easter Bunny story. And I was going to say, honey, the Easter Bunny dropped some stuff off. Here's what this stuff is. And here's why I got it. And here's what we're going to do with it. And I realized that the Easter Bunny speech, like what I got, why I got it, and how we're going to use it, was a really good explanation of preparedness and prepping. So the Easter Bunny speech started off as a Post-it note with some bullet points. And then, because this was going to be a big speech, it could be the end of the marriage, right? So I had to work on making this a good presentation. It started off as a Post-it note. It became a one-page set of bullet points, kept going and going and going, because there was a lot of information in this, why I did this, how I did this. And then I thought, well, this Easter Bunny speech might help some people out, because there are probably a lot of, usually guys, that need to make an Easter Bunny speech to usually their wives. And so I'll write it up as a chapter and put it up on a forum. As I say, I'd never written fiction before. I mean, legal writing doesn't count because it's a whole different kind of writing. Nobody wants to read it. That's one difference between,
but it's not fun.
Yeah, exactly. And so, footnotes, citing statutes, not fun. So I just kind of made it up, and I had some dialogue. And then I realized, well, I need a chapter if this is going to actually give anybody any information about why I'm like I am, about how I grew up in a rural area and then went to the suburbs, became a lawyer, and became this slob that sat on the couch and watched TV and couldn't start a fire if my life depended on all these things. And then I needed to have a chapter probably explaining why my then wife was so resistant to this. She grew up wealthy and didn't think anything would ever go wrong. It's America. I mean, everything's awesome all the time. Of course, that's just the way the world is, right? And so I kept writing and writing and writing. It never occurred to me to turn this into a book until I had written several chapters. And then, this is going to sound weird, not as weird as the Easter Bunny being responsible for all of this, but I could not stop writing. I would get up at 1 a.m, 3 a.m. That was sleeping in, and I would write and write and write. I wrote these books in secret. My then wife never even knew I was writing these books. Apparently that created a bit of an honesty issue and a little bit of a trust issue, I found out later. But so I wrote and I wrote, and I had amazing friends in real life, the team and others. And I just started projecting out on paper, keyboard, how they would react if the situation is this, how they would react. And I kid you not, I could not stop writing. I had these little slips of paper and these little golf pencils, and I would constantly make notes all day long and come home and put them down as stories. So it started, and I didn't even think about it, because again, I wasn't even trying to write a book, let alone 10. And so I didn't do what should have been pretty obvious to a normal functioning adult. I didn't say, maybe I should see if this can get published before I write it. I just wrote it because it was in my head and it needed to get out of my head. And then I sent it, as I say, to a publisher who did a 10-book deal. And now I had to tell my wife, right? There's going to be, in the States, a 1099 miscellaneous income, right? Somebody was going to be on Amazon and maybe have a seizure and their head would hit the buy it now button, and somebody was going to buy one of them just out of accident, is honestly what I thought. There was a $1,900 used pickup that I really wanted. And I said, if I sell enough books to buy that pickup, I'll be happy. I kid you not. So very low expectations. And then it took off. So I think that by not trying to write a book or 10, it turned out far better because I had no template. I don't read fiction because I don't have time. And so I had nothing to copy. I think most people would agree 299 Days does not read like other novels, because it isn't. They'll say things like, oh, this dialogue is so creative. And I laugh. It's not creative. It's what me and my buddy said. I mean, it's real life. It's very, very real. And that's different than other prepper fiction, all of which is good and people should read. And I'm not, dissing any other authors, but the story is authentic, me, warts and all, mistakes and all of that. The dialogue is incredibly authentic because it is actually stuff we talk about. My friends, the real team, and we're still friends and we're still a team, and we've been doing it for 10 years. One time, Pal, the 6-foot Korean gunfighter who sells insurance, real dude, said, he's laughing and he said, whatever I say seems to end up in a book somewhere. And I said, that's the risk you take talking to me. So that's why it's authentic. So it's been a lot of fun. Got a message out to a lot of people about preparedness, and also a message about not just like going and killing a bunch of people. I mean, the collapse of the United States, and that would obviously include Canada because we're so connected, is not something to look forward to. And it's not a chance to kill a bunch of people you never really liked. But defend yourself, take care of yourself, take care of your family, and fight for freedom, and all of those things. That mixture between those two seeming ends of a spectrum, but they're not really ends of a spectrum, because if you're a decent patriot, you're going to have a mindset that is, just clear, and you're just going to do the right thing. That's why we're patriots. So that's the book in a nutshell. And I never, ever thought I would be on this show or any other show. I never thought we'd have our own podcast. It's been a lot of low expectations that were exceeded in a good way.
I believe that you said originally this was published as a short work on a forum. I think I remember that internet forum and the podcast it went along with.
Yeah,
survival
podcast.
Yeah, Jack Spirko's show.
Exactly right.
How was that received when you started to put that up and people got a taste of it before it was the novels?
I never put it up. I was going to put it up. I got so busy writing it. It was never finished in my mind. I was like, well, there are some loose ends here and some loose ends here. So I was waiting for it to be perfect. And then I realized, after about a book or two, this has gone beyond a forum. So now I have to go and self-publish it. And like I say, somebody's going to, have a seizure and hit the buy it now button. And then what am I going to do? I actually viewed it as a problem, because I'm not kidding you. I knew that I would have to report some income and that my wife would see it. And I was dreading that. I was dreading selling a single book.
It's kind of funny because I'm actually surprised that you're surprised it was successful, because it's not actually that much of a stretch. It's barely even fiction. When you think about, government incompetence, economic meltdowns, and, government overreach and everything else, it's not that big of a stretch these days, is it? I mean, like, no matter what political stripe is in charge, I mean, whether it be on our side of the border or yours, I mean, it's an ongoing thing.
Yeah. And one of the things about the books, and since you two have read them, you can understand what I'm saying pretty well, and anyone else has read them. I don't consider myself any kind of prophet. I mean, there was no magic to any of this. I just looked at the way people in other parts of the world, and especially recently, but also in the past, how human beings act. I looked at Argentina in 2001. That was a big impact when they had their big meltdown. And I looked at Bosnia, which is a little bit of a different flavor. You've got not racial, but ethnic strife and sort of a ethno-civil war. And then I looked at Russia in the early 90s with their currency completely devaluating. And I've never been in the military. I've never been overseas. I've never been to another country, as a matter of fact. So I don't have some worldly perspective on any of this. It's just that I looked at how people react in those situations. And it seemed obvious to me that Americans, and when I say Americans, I include Canadians in this, would react. If anything, Americans and Canadians would react. The way Americans and Canadians would react differently is actually worse for us, because we're so used to a high standard of living. We're so used to comfort. We're so used to security that when all that goes away, we're going to freak out even harder. I mean, if you're living in Nigeria and you're used to, people coming and beheading people and stealing your women and doing horrible things, inflation's not such a big deal, right? But with us, it would be even harder. And so I factored some of that in, and I would look around me. I lived in at the time, very liberal place. It's the place that the books take place in, Olympia, Washington, one of the most left-wing U.S. cities in the United States. And I would look around and think about how the people around me, my friends and everything, how they would react. And it made for a good story, because the reaction of the general population, although this is different now. That was 2012 when I wrote this primarily. Now with 2020, we now have toilet paper preppers. Everybody went out and bought toilet paper with the COVID thing. And it's more believable for regular people that they would realize because they'd seen for the first time in their life, they go to Walmart and the shelves are empty, or a shelf is empty, or half the shelves are empty, or whatever the case was. It's not make believe anymore, and they can understand it. Now, they don't think it's going to be that bad because they think Biden got elected, which he didn't. Anyway, we won't get into U.S. politics here because that would be boring. But I think it's easier for people to believe now. So that was part of it. And I looked at these, as I mentioned, these friends of mine I had, like Special Forces Ted is a real guy. I started hanging out at a gun store, and one of the guys that hung out there's a big military base near Olympia. He was a Green Beret, and got to know him, and he started training us, and he was just a wealth of information. He'd been all over the world. He'd seen all kinds of things. He had a lot of thoughts about a coming collapse of the United States. So I would weave him into the story. And so I say this, people think I'm kidding. I'm not. I don't think I'm interesting, but my friends are really interesting. And I just sit back and listen to them and weave their story into the story of all these other people I know. And it turned out to be something that was very popular. And that's great. I'm glad.
A lot of the things in the books that I don't want to say predicted. You already said you're not a prophet, but a lot of the things in the book I think have come to pass. We've started to see some of the social breakdown over the last couple of years. We've seen 4 years of unhappy Americans with the outcome of the 2016 election. The last couple of years, there's been a lot more rioting and less stability in your country, and spill over into ours as a result. We've had our own riots and Black Lives Matter protests and other assorted assaults on our democracy. Do you think we're going to start to see a total collapse the way that it's written in your novels?
Yes. I write about a partial collapse, and that doesn't mean things are only half bad. It means that the standard idea that a lot of people have, and I got a lot of this from Jack Spirko, by the way, Andrew, you referred to his show. I don't think it's, going to be a comet striking the earth and all life dies. That's pretty dramatic. And the more dramatic something is, the less likely it is to occur. So I think we would have partial collapse. There would be an economic component, political component, social unrest, all the things we're seeing. I think it'll get worse in the U.S. Whether Biden wins and then the left turns on him, the hard left, which is already starting to happen, which I find hilarious. I'm not going to lift a finger and go liberate Seattle, you guys. I mean, are you kidding me? I'm going to pop some popcorn and watch it on TV. And I know that sounds terrible. Don't care anymore.
No.
Do not care a whit. And so, yeah, you guys are in the same boat, right? And so
we have a running bet as to how long it's going to take.
How long do you think it's going to take?
In weeks or years.
Depends on who you're asking,
yeah.
But
well, I
mean,
mean,
when we get this next election count sorted out, because then we're talking about, are we days or months?
Yeah, because I mean, and even for us economically, we and of course you wrote the novels around 2012. In 2013, even our Republican quote unquote government, which we call our conservatives, they actually introduced bail-in legislation for the banks just after the Cyprus deal. And of course, your novels came out, and I'm sure they've done the same down in the States. So they've already got in place the mechanisms to do what they did in your books, as far as that goes. So that there's a lot of paperwork taken care of already for a lot of the stuff. We've got the same political problems you do as well. It's just it's been an ongoing thing here for sure. Steady downward spiral.
I'm thinking things like Seattle and Olympia from the novels. I mean, Portland writ large, really.
Chaz.
Last year of rioting and Chaz and defunding the police and making autonomous zones. I would not be surprised if we see that in a larger way, with more urban centers going that way. Both, I mean, the U.S. obviously, places like Portland, New York, Seattle, Los Angeles, so on and so forth. But we'll see it here too, I would imagine, with places like Toronto, Montreal.
Well, it's never enough because, I mean, they just, theoretically, there might have been a Biden election. However, and right away, AOC there, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, says they haven't gone far enough to the left. we've got the same thing in Canada. We've elected a leftist government for twice now, and the party that's propping them up saying you need to go further left. So yeah, the political pressure is there on a national scale.
And on top of all that, and I'm sure this is the same in Canada, the COVID-related economic destruction, the intentional, reckless, unnecessary destruction of the economy is a big factor. And a lot of those bills haven't come due yet. In many states, including Washington State, there's been a moratorium on paying rent, but all that rent is still due all at once. And that might run out on, say, December 31st, when all of a sudden people owe 8 months rent. And they haven't probably been saving all their money to pay the rent. That's probably not happening. Maybe they can't, in fairness to them. I see that. But there's going to be, I don't know, the chickens are going to come home to roost. There's going to be massive economic problems in the U.S. We've printed all this stupid money, and it can't be sustained. And then Biden, if he is the president, is going to reintroduce regulations and all these things. Now, of course, the bigger short to medium term chance for violence would be if Trump is made the president by a 5-4 U.S. Supreme Court decision with Amy Coney Barrett casting the deciding vote, something like that, which I would love to happen. It would make me so happy. But
that would speed up our timeline on Seattle.
It would speed it up. There'd be nanoseconds after that was announced. That would obviously kick things off. But even if that doesn't happen, you're seeing all kinds of people on the right in the U.S. The 70 million people that voted for Trump, the actual alive people that actually were validly casting ballots, in contrast to many Biden voters. You're seeing the right here understand what the stakes are. In 2016, they saw the hill, that when Trump was inaugurated, and back then, like, one riot was a big deal. I mean, it's actually precisely, literally a nightly event in Portland right now. And so now I think the right has seen what the stakes are. They've seen the obvious cheating. It's crystal clear. And I think conservatives aren't going to have it. So for the next 4 years, even under Biden, conservatives are going to have much less patience for nonsense. And if Biden does what he said he'll do and start taking away guns, that obviously kicks it off. I mean, just 100% kicks it off. So something's coming, whether it's a big dramatic event like an executive order that you got to turn in your guns tomorrow, probably unlikely, again, it's more dramatic, but the economic stuff and the social stuff, and then the left turning on the Democrats. Communists always allow socialists to get the communists into power, and then once they're in power, the communists always kill all the socialists. I have a Soviet studies degree, for what it's worth, speak a little Russian. I think I know a little bit about at least how the communist world does it. And that's exactly what they do. And I could see that happening in the U.S., the left on left violence, which means the cities will become monster hellholes that they already are. The rural areas will be less affected, and the suburbs will be somewhere in between. But it'll be this big mishmash of uncertainty and chaos, and people won't be able to rely on going to Walmart and getting Doritos. And if that's a shock to your world and you don't know how you can live, you have problems. But if you're nimble and adaptive and you've prepared a little bit, you'll be just fine. In fact, life may be better, because I think the America that used to exist was too comfortable and too lazy, and it wasn't good. It's not how human beings are built, and it wasn't fulfilling. So those of us that can adapt will have much more fulfilling lives. And the masses who can't adapt are going to have it really, really rough. And okie dokie, what can you do? Hate to say it, but it's absolutely true.
We're actually seeing that happen in China right now. And was it four or six of the legislators in Hong Kong were told to step down or be shot, essentially. And so the Chinese government just said no, or you don't serve the needs of the people anymore, and off you go.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was yesterday that happened. It was. You're right. Like it's going to happen. It is happening right now, and it has happened before.
Well, the first step is usually confiscating weapons, any means of fighting back, and that's also why, of course, they execute the intelligentsia, because they're the ones that can critically attack the communists, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a little bit about the firearms thing and the financial thing, because we've gone through in Canadian news and politics recently, and we've gone through a big round of quantitative easing. We're talking about something like $400 billion on our a budget we normally measure in billions. We're much smaller than the U.S. for scale wise. We're not talking about trillions of dollars like with their budgets. So we're talking about hundreds of percentage over our normal budget in quantitative easing, and we don't have the same level of I'm going to say right and left politics that they have in the U.S. We don't have the same big divide where you have a lot of very conservative or very liberal people. We have, I would say, more liberal people and then really liberal people, really left-wing people. Just pick your flavor of socialism up here. But I don't think that we're going to end up seeing a lot of the same violent clashes that I would expect to see in the U.S., especially following like a surprise Trump election win. If that comes through and you get a surprise Trump second term presidency, and I can't even fathom the level of violence that you're going to see in major urban centers. Here, we wouldn't see anything nearly on that level, I don't think.
Well, they were already spooling up on election night in Washington, D.C. You could see the crowds were starting to gather, and they'd actually surrounded a bunch of police. And then once they found out their guy looked like he might have a chance, they all backed away. But they were all already planned and in place.
Yeah, the one thing, though, I agree from what I know about, not much, but I know a little bit about sort of the character of Canadians. You know, if I can generalize, very nice people, peaceful, and they get along and all of that. And those are all good qualities. I think there would be less American style violence, but at some point, people will be people, in a fight over resources. You know, you can have the nicest neighbors, and if you're the only guy with some KD, craft dinner, see what I did there? I know Canada. If you're the only guy with KD, people are going to get ugly. So that's still going to be true, but it's going to, I think, take Canadians longer, and the conditions will have to be worse before they start turning on each other en masse. I would think, and I've not lived in Canada, so I don't know, but that's my impression.
I think outside of very, very urban places, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, those really large urban centers. So for us, like 1 million people, small country, low population density, I don't think that you're going to see a lot of the same violence. The other thing that we have that the Americans have us is outgunned. We don't have nearly the same volume of firearms, although we have firearms, or at least we had firearms. Recent change in our firearms law. That's not even really a change in our law. A recent administrative change has moved the AR-15s to prohibited status. We have different classes of firearms in Canada, non-restricted, restricted, prohibited. Depending on what the gun is, it falls into a different class. And prohibited firearms are basically unobtainable short-barreled pistols, extremely short rifles, fully automatic weapons, etc. All of our AR-15s and handguns are basically restricted. They're only allowed to be used at a gun range. They're not allowed to be carried on your person. You can't use them for self-defense. Unlike all of your non-restricted firearms, shotguns and rifles that you can use for hunting. So we've recently gone through the first major step to disarmament that we've had since '95, when the last round of gun legislation actually came into effect. So I have some concerns around what we're going to end up seeing here in Canada if it does come down to the last box of KD. Who's the one guy that still has a functional AR-15? Because we didn't have that many of them to begin with, and now we're, I don't know, pending destruction or confiscation or some sort of grandfathering scheme with them. So we still have our hunting rifles and shotguns and some handguns. but we don't have the level of arms that they have in the U.S. So if it comes down to violent altercations to get that box of craft dinner, I'm not sure what a guy with a knife and a guy with a frying pan in downtown Toronto are going to do. The guy with the frying pan wins because he can do something with the KD, but.
Well, if you remember, Glenn, back in the day when Obama was threatening to get a pen and a cell phone and he was going to do some executive orders to start banning guns, that's basically what happened here back in May. So they just basically did an executive order, different name up here, but with the stroke of a pen, put 1,500 guns on the chopping block or 1,500 variants of a gun. So
Mix and models and so forth. But don't worry, they ban things like cannons and rocket launchers too.
Oh, good. What a relief.
Feel super safe.
There've been a lot of boating accidents this year, like
Mhm.
a shocking number of boating accidents this fall. It's been people just aren't paying attention anymore. It's crazy.
I've watched Red Green, and I know how they use duct tape on those boats, so I could see this happening. It makes perfect sense to me with my knowledge of the Canadian culture, like I do have.
It's
They don't
a
find you
sad
handsome.
statement.
they should at
They
least
should
find you
at least
handy.
find you handy.
It's really unfortunate how accurate that is too.
Duct tape will fix a lot of things. I do have gun questions for Glenn.
Sure.
Snap decision: Glock or 1911?
Are you kidding me? Glock all day, every day, period. Bam, done.
Dirty American. Serious firearms question. If you could have a firearm that was legal in the jurisdiction in which you live, you could just have a firearm, a single one. What would it be and why?
Oh, it would be an AR-15, a pistol with an arm brace. It would be 10 and a half inches long. It would have a suppressor and a red dot, and that'd be about it. Why? Handy utility gun, light. I hate heavy guns. Now, if I'm just like shooting or hunting or whatever, I don't mind a heavy gun. In fact, there are a lot of obvious benefits to a heavy gun, recoil control and all of that other stuff. But if you've ever carried a gun around all day or 2 or 3 days, then the weight becomes a thing. And I just love the ergonomics of the AR-15. I have AKs and love those too for different reasons. But it would be a short-barreled AR-15 with a can for sure.
And both aroused.
Can is a
and
suppressor.
And
Sorry.
upset by your answer.
What did you think it would be?
No, sorry. Upset's not the word. Jealous. Jealous is the word.
Well, let me tell you, suppressor. I said can. That's American. I don't know what's. Again, I'm not fully bilingual, so I don't know what your word for that.
Our word
can,
for suppressor is illegal. Our word for suppressor
okay,
is
it's illegal. But with a suppressor, it is not easy to get one. It takes about a year, and it's a nightmare process. I've been waiting on one because there was a big run on suppressors, so there weren't any. I'm on year 2 now, and I haven't even sent. I just sent it off to ATF, so it'll be another 6 months, 8 months. It'll be almost 3 years. That's unusual, but so they don't just grow on trees here. So that'd be cool.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous of that. All my ARs have to be locked up in my safe to keep the country safe.
And more than 18 inches long, and have magazines pinned to 10 rounds. And
No, not true.
No, I guess not.
ARs
Yeah.
because they're restricted by name here. Previously any length of barrel was all treated the same here. We could have a 3-inch barrel AR, and it was the same as a 23-inch barrel AR because they were all just treated like handguns, and you could basically only shoot them at a government-approved range.
Well, here's a question, and this will be boring for listeners in Canada who know the answer, but my question is, what about revolvers? Can you guys have revolvers?
Yes, our pistol laws are special. You can have a pistol as long as it's not really short.
Okay.
So we have like a short barrel pistol rule. If the barrel is less than 4.25 inches,
Mm-hmm.
then you can't have it. It becomes prohibited unless you're a police officer or you have a permit to have a prohibited firearm, mostly grandfathering for people before they changed that law in the mid-90s.
Mm-hmm.
But any kind of automatic or revolver, any sort of a handgun, as long as the barrel's over 4.25, you're good to go. So Desert Eagle,
Nice.
no problem.
Okay.
Your big
Good to know.
K-frames, good to go.
Nice. I like me a K-frame, so that's good.
Well, those are good guns, right?
And also 25 and 32 caliber, because
And yes,
yeah,
because we can't have fun things that the
those are
Olympians
bad
might
and-
want to use.
bad and evil.
They were used in a number of crimes in the late 80s.
I have to say, you're not missing out on much by not having 25 ACP or 32 auto. I mean, they're kind of like BB guns, really. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, I shouldn't wade into this. There's probably a lot of 25 ACP lovers out there, and I just don't know, because while I do like my chips dressed and I like my KD, just got to quit doing this. I'm an American.
No,
I don't even
no.
know what I'm talking about. Just ignore me. I've had 18 beers, so it's a problem.
That's only a problem if you run out. I think we're going to run into some issues here with our firearms ownership in the short term, which I think might be our only stumbling block with our politicians. Otherwise, they'd be able to get away with whatever changes they wanted to make, because we've only got about 30 million people, but 2 million of them have got firearms that are registered and legal. And there's probably another couple million that never bothered to register theirs in Western Canada and rural places that
Like Alberta.
Alberta would be a big one. There's more than a few guns in Alberta that the government probably doesn't have on the books.
I can attest to that. Yes.
Allegedly.
Oh, Alberta.
I've heard rumors thereof.
So yeah, a couple million gun owners in this country, and we're only 30 million people, so it's not an inconsequential number of firearms, and we tend to have the super firearms owner problem. Most people here that have guns don't just have a gun. It's not the glove box gun or the behind the door shotgun or the once a year deer rifle. Most people here tend to have several. You go to all the effort to get one, you might as well get a couple.
It's a really big stumbling block to get the first one. After that, it's easy. It's like tattoos. Once you have one, the rest of them are easy.
Well, in some
We're
ways, it's
killing
used in the
homeless
States.
people. Killing homeless people. It's the same thing. After the first one, it's like, it's not even as much fun.
That's terrible. Funny, but terrible.
And that's what I appreciate about you.
I'm just reinforcing every Canadian stereotype of Americans. Like, yeah, he's drunk and he's killing homeless people and bragging about it. I mean, these people up, down south, I mean, we got to do something about it. We got to build a wall along the 49th parallel.
I've been making that argument for a long time, but it's mostly around putting the wall around Toronto.
Yeah, we really could we give that to you for some just take it.
Yes.
Take Toronto.
We would like to sell Toronto to you.
$1. Just make it easy.
An American dollar.
An American dollar. Yeah, that's like $4 Canadian. I'm down with that.
I won't say anything about currency exchange rates.
Oh
I
yeah.
appreciate that. Let's go.
Currency exchange rates and the price of gas.
Petrol. See what I did there? I'm annoying all your listeners, but maybe they find it entertaining. I don't know.
I find it entertaining.
Okay.
And really, that's why we do the show, is so that I'm entertained. Actually, we do the show normally so I can get drunk with my friends and complain about the government, but this is a close second.
It's
Well, I
like
wasn't-
the same thing.
I wasn't kidding about growing up. I don't know if I mentioned this on air or off air. I grew up watching Canadian TV. If I mention it, sorry to repeat. So, because we were so far up north on the U.S. side. And so things like petrol and everything, I mean, I'm halfway KD. I mean, I know about that. I mean, it's delicious. Why wouldn't you know about it? So I know a little bit about Canada, but everything I've mentioned is the sum total of my Canadian knowledge. So anything I say after this, I'm just going to embarrass myself. Standard.
Just keep making it up. That's what we do. I actually, on the topic of making things up, I have you've done a couple of interviews. We're not your first rodeo. I don't know how you say it in American.
Ooh, I see what you did there. That was good.
Well,
Sound like a Texan there, Andrew.
Throw in a y'all.
y'all, I need a bigger hat. No, so you've been on a number of interviews, and obviously you've got your own podcast with Shelby. What question are you tired of answering when you do these podcasts?
In all honesty, I'm not tired of any question, because I can't believe to this day that people want me on the show on their shows and that they want to listen to what I have to say. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, I stumbled into all of this and it still amazes me. So a common question, but I understand why it's asked. So it doesn't annoy me, but it's a very common question, was the one you asked about or implied, the Nostradamus question, right? Predicting things and how did I see all this coming? And I just have to say what I said earlier, which was it's just human nature. I mean, the only thing that's new, the only thing I added to it, and other prepper authors, to be honest, I'm not the only one, is taking human nature that exists in the rest of the world and putting it in the setting of America. So that is one thing. I don't think there's anything that annoys me. A slight point of contention sometimes with the story, and it's rare, but it is. Some people are really upset by this part of the story, and that is in book 1, my character. So I hope I'm not blowing it for anybody, but I mean, it's book 1. I'm not telling you like what happens in book 10. In book 1, my wife in the story is my real wife. And I actually downplayed in the books how hostile she was to prepping. So I actually made her look better than she really was, which some people find amazing. By the way, this is not the Canadian Glen rips on his ex-wife hour, because that's not good radio. That's not good YouTube. Nobody wants to hear that. But I'll say this. So in book 1, my character, when things are falling apart and the wife doesn't want to leave the Olympia where everything's falling apart, my character picks up and leaves without her. And for some people, that it makes them mad. And they'll say, I know it's fiction and I know you really wouldn't do that. And Glenn, you seem like a nice guy, but they get kind of animated. And so that is not a annoying thing, but that is a somewhat of a bit of friction. And then people read book 2, 3, 4, and they get what happens and they're not as mad. So I don't know that I have a great direct answer to your question.
No, that's okay. It was mostly just to see, we've been accused of not having enough, I'm going to use your word. We've been accused of not having enough friction on this show. So I figured if there was a really good thing that I could pick away at to bother you, but if it's just that you abandoned your wife and then unabandoned her later.
I mean, if that bothers people, then, just a guy who abandons his wife is like a jerk or whatever. I mean, I don't know. We're not as polite in America. Canadians.
It's a jerk move, but I think that it illustrated a good point in the novel.
Well, continuation bias is a problem, right? And people suffer from it.
That's right. That was the whole point of that. And it's also what I thought my first wife would have done in the situation. Mm-hmm.
That's fair. Are you planning on writing any more novels, or is 10 and done?
I don't plan on writing any novels, and there's a reason why I would write more. So the reason I don't plan on writing anymore, there are actually 2 reasons. One is and this is not a religious show, so I just need to mention it because it's part of the answer. I think when I was writing 299 Days, I know this to be true, there was an inspiration from outside of me. I'm just going to leave it at that. And some of the amazing story connections and some of the stuff I came up with, I don't really think was coming from me, because I don't think I'm that creative. And I'd never written fiction before. And I would look at this stuff and say, golly, did this really come from me? So I'm not feeling that inspiration now. And I made a deal with, I guess, God, really. I'm not going to write unless there's a reason, there's an inspiration, and there's a message to get out about treating people decently and preparing. So I don't want to abuse the very rare honor and magnificent grace I received. So there's that. The other reason is a practical reason. And so if you're not religious, this reason will make perfect sense to you standing on its own. I don't have any time. I'm a litigator. I have a lot of jobs, and I don't have any time, and I'm not going to, I guess we can say it since we're on YouTube, I'm not going to half-ass it. And there's no way I could do that. Too many people have gotten too much out of these books to then come back and have like some spin-off thing. I don't know if you guys had Happy Days in the 70s and 80s, that TV show about the 50s. And you remember when they had spin-offs like Joni Loves Chachi and Laverne and Shirley, and then there was like Fonzie jumps the shark. He's like on a surfboard or something. He jumps over. It's when a series is just trying to do dumb stuff to get ratings, and I don't want to do that. Time, though, is a really big factor. So that's the reasons not to write more. The reason to write more would be if I were inspired. And the cool thing about having been inspired, I believe, by God in the past is I know what it feels like. I know what it's like to not be able to sleep because all you can do is write and write and write. Getting goosebumps as usual, just even talking about that topic. So I'll know it if I'm going to do it. And if I do it, it's because I'm inspired. And if I do it and I'm inspired, it'll be amazing stuff. And if I'm not getting the right message out, it'll just be garbage. And I don't want people going, yeah, Glen's 11th album was no good, right? The first 10 were, but the 11th was really kind of gross. I don't want to be American music reference here. Jefferson Starship, right? And remember that? Anyway, I don't know how old you guys are, but now Canada has had some pretty bad music, if you don't mind me saying. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm now going to insult.
Don't mind at all.
As long as we're about to insult Nickelback, we're okay.
And Justin Bieber and
They're awful.
Loverboy.
what, are you not a big fan
Loverboy.
of tight-fitting leather pants or what?
I am not unless they're on chicks. Chilliwack. Do you guys remember Chilliwack?
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Just absolutely awful.
Yeah, that was just terrible. Now there's probably good stuff I've never listened to, but there you have it. Anyways, welcome to our show. Why don't you make fun of our country's music? Oh, have another beer. I mean, that's not good guesting, but I just did it.
We could talk about Taylor Swift. I mean, right back at you.
Oh
Right?
yeah, no, there's tons of awful American music. Are you kidding me?
There's a strong overlap in those two groups.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Strong overlap. You do strike me as a pretty busy person, but somehow you've also found time to start doing your own podcast on a
Yeah.
pretty fast cadence.
Oh my goodness gracious. And it's really ramped up now. So the podcast is Prepping 2.0, and I'll give out the website. It'll probably be in the show notes too. It's prepping2-0.com. We're on episode 106, which comes out tonight, by the way. And it started off just kind of like the books as sort of this lark and this idea of how hard could it be. And I don't mean to say like I knew how hard podcasting would be and all the time and technical expertise that was involved. And I think I'm so cool that I thought it would be easy. No, I just didn't know what was involved. So here is a great story too. Not as good as the Easter Bunny story, but it's a pretty good story. So Shelby and I are driving down the road one day, and we would play this game where we would look into another car, like on a freeway. We'd look at other drivers, and we played a game called Live or Die. And the game was, in the collapse, will the person or persons in that car live or die, and why? And we would, I mean, it was politically incorrect. It was vicious and mean. Of course, they can't hear us. So, it wasn't as bad, but we would crack ourselves up. We would just like have tears rolling out of our eyes. And so I looked at her and I go, wouldn't it be cool, like have a podcast or something and do this? She's like, yeah, right. So a couple of weeks later, we go on a show talking about books. Cause at this point, this is only 2 years ago. At this point, the only thing in our world was books, right? That's what we did. We talked about books and we liked that. And that was cool. So we go on somebody's show, and at a break, he says, you guys should like do a podcast. You guys have this banter. I know you're married, so it's like you complete each other's sentences and be pretty cool. And we're like, that'd be cool. So Shelby goes on Google and finds like how to podcast, get a $35 gamer headset and Audacity, and start talking. And then we had a producer guy, a radio producer friend of hers, who would put the tracks on top of each other, and we put them out, and it was pretty cool. And then it kept growing and growing, and then we getting sponsors and getting listeners and Patreon supporters, and we've kept working on it. And now we have a second producer. Our first producer had to take a day job where he couldn't do this right-wing wacko stuff, and our second producer is absolutely amazing. He's a Hollywood I mean, he's done TV anchor news. I mean, he's done some amazing stuff. We are his students and he teaches us. And now it has become, I think, really, really polished. We have a real studio. We have 3 sets of mics and headphones for various ways, Zoom H6 and Skype and all this other stuff that we do. So it's become a really big thing. And I think the coolest part of the show first of all, it's all the Patreons and listeners who tell us, oh my goodness, I listened to that show and I did X, Y, and Z, and oh my goodness, we're more prepared and the marriage is running smoother. We hear that a lot too from husbands and wives that may not be on the same page. And then one of the two will say, hey, listen to this show, and they're not crazy and they seem like kind of normal people. Just tell me what you think. And that's really, really gratifying. But the guests we have on, because it's just like, here I am, a lawyer, and I would go to this gun store and hang out at lunch to be away from other lawyers because I can't stand them. And I'd be like rolling up my sleeves, literally making AR-15s at lunch. And then like a Green Beret would walk in and strike up I mean, who has this happen to him? But in the same vein, all these incredibly interesting people that I've met, mostly through the books, because I'm not a Green Beret, right? So, I mean, they've become friends and we have them on the show, and we have this amazing but these folks these guests that come on the show, and every single show where we have a guest, sometimes we don't, Shelby and I will listen to guests and we'll say, oh my God, I never thought of that. Or, hey, I have an idea. We learn as much or more from doing the show as people learn from listening to the show. And that's been very cool too. So now we've added, because it's expanding, again, the TP prepper thing and the political stuff. There's been a huge spike in interest in anything with the word prepping in it. Now we have video bonus shows that we record right here via Zoom, have guests on, and we put those up for our Patreon supporters at the $5 a month and more level. And we're putting out 2 a week. We're going on amazing shows. This one in particular, well, this will be something we'll share the link with Patreons and all of that other stuff. So there's been an explosion. I don't know if renaissance is the word. There's been a blossoming of activity on the podcast, and we absolutely, we love it. We cannot get enough of doing this. So it's been fun. And that always has to be the driving force to do something, for me, at least. I don't know, different people are different. I have to be enthused about it. I have to want to do it. It has to be fun. I have to throw myself into it. That's why I didn't last very long in large law firms and corporations and things like that. I'm not that kind of guy. So the podcast has been a fantastic blessing, and we're really getting, if I may say, a lot of good information out. We have topics that range from normalcy bias to, human trafficking. It's not just gun stuff. We talk about things that nobody else talks about. Here's a great example of that. I'll just give you one example. We pride ourselves on this, of these interesting, I think, topics no one else talks about. The reason the show is called Prepping 2.0 is it's the next level of prepping. Prepping 1.0 is having your beans and bullets and AR-15s, if you can have them, right? And so that's prepping 1.0, but 2.0 is thinking about your community and how to make sure everybody's on the same page and that you're working together, and communications and all that kind of second level stuff. So here's an example of a topic, Shelby's idea. It was brilliant. No one has ever said, hey, teenagers, what do you guys think about this COVID thing or this prepping thing or this possible pending civil war? Because I'll be honest, I mean, who really cares about the opinions of teenagers? Let's be honest. And Shelby's stepson, or my stepson, her son, is 15. He's a brilliant, wonderful kid. If anyone's going to have like a brilliant idea at 15, it's going to be him. And so she asked him, she said, so what's up with this COVID thing? How's this affecting you? Because now he can't play football, and that's CFL football, not soccer, just, so we're clear on that. You guys have not only a 50-yard line, you have a center line, and it's 3 downs. It's crazy what you guys do.
The wrong number of downs.
It's fun to watch. It is fun to watch. It moves quickly.
3 downs, 110 yards, and 1 less guy on the line.
Okay, I didn't know about that. So it's fun to watch. But anyway, it was like, how is this affecting you, the 15-year-old? And I got to be honest, she recorded this show. I was really sick, and so I wasn't involved with it. And I thought, this is going to suck. I mean, really, come on, 15-year-olds, they're not exactly wise, right? Boy, was I wrong. It's not just that he's a good kid. He talked about the fear that his friends have and how they feel like a lot of their life, they're American or Canadian, I guess, up, their childhood, they're going to go to football games, they're going to do this, they're going to go to proms, they're going to do all this cool stuff. They're going to like get to go to school in a real class and not just do internet. I mean, all these things. And the fear he felt. Now, being Glenn and Shelby's kid, it means that you're constantly looking for communist troops paratrooping into your yard. So, that's right, Wolverines. So maybe he feels more fear than other kids who got normal parents. But and it was over an hour of him describing this, and I was spellbound. So that's an example of how we take a topic nobody else is addressing as it relates to preparedness and put it out there. And I was really proud of how he did on that show. So there you go. That's the podcast, and we love doing it. It's a rich catalog. Our downloads keep going up every month. It's crazy.
Can we go into a little bit about the corona and the quarantine stuff? I mean, particularly with having a teenager and going through the online learning stuff and not having football, what else is coronacation caused for you guys? It sounds like an uptick in your podcasting. It sounds like there's implications with your stepson, but what's changed with how you've prepped? What's changed with your day-to-day as a result of corona? Day-to-day
has been almost no change for me and for Shelby. Now, of course, for the stepson, it's been a big change, as previously mentioned. I work in an industry that's essential, so I pretty much I don't wear a mask anywhere except if I go to a store and all of that other stuff. And so it hasn't affected us in any real day-to-day way. And obviously there's more interest in the topic, so we mentioned that. The way it's affected the preps was really interesting. I didn't fully understand how this would play out, and it worked out well. It really kicked us into gear. We were prepping pretty hard, and around February, April, or February, March. We have March in the States. I don't know do you guys have March also? Is that a month up there, or is it? Okay.
It's right after October.
Okay, October. So it's God, you guys are hilarious. So we cranked it up. I mean, all these things these projects, it wasn't just buying stuff. There was some aspect of that. I bought a crap ton of ammunition. So that was, in hindsight, a really good idea. It was ramping up things that, the chicken coop got built, greenhouse got fixed up, all kinds of things like that. It really kicked us into gear. We didn't have a day off on our weekends or anything until like the middle of the summer. So it was a great blessing, really kicked us into gear. And so I'm glad it happened. I'm sorry people died and stuff like that, but it was a kick in the patootie, as we say down here. We don't say that.
We just say kick in the ass.
Yeah.
It's
whoa, easy. So yeah, that's no effect, but yes, an effect on the preps.
That's good. I think we've covered that a little bit, and I know Ian and Alan on the prepper show that they do, they've covered quite a bit of the fallout from the coronas.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much all we talked about for about 6 months.
Yeah,
it does certainly seem that way. Now it sounds like your current wife is a much needed and much improved version. The other people, the cool folks in your life outside of your wonderful spouse, how did you find special forces guys to hang out with and all of these other, I'm going to say characters, but I mean,
yeah,
I know that they're not just characters in the novel. How did you build the team and build this community and find all of these like-minded individuals, especially when you live in a
communist held territory? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. A lot of it was fortuity, obviously. It started at a gun store. I'm a big fan of being in places where the people you want to meet are. I've never really been single. I guess I was single for about 4 minutes or something like that, so that doesn't count. But I mean, if you're looking for, in my case, ladies of a particular kind, you might go to a place where they are. Tattoo parlor for me, obviously. Probably more church, but anyway. And so I wasn't planning on that. I was just, like I say, go to this gun store to build ARs, and there were all these cool, interesting people. That's where we all met, started shooting from there. The team has grown. The team in the books has been augmented, and there are several team members that are not in the books and you've never heard of before. Very similar kind of guys. So you would
Are they
get
just
the picture.
less entertaining, and that's why they didn't make it in?
No, I didn't have a time machine. I didn't know them at the time, but they since bubbled up through a variety of ways. So I got, that's a question I used to get a lot of, and I haven't got it in a while, which is basically, how do you meet a team and form a team, and how did this all come about? I have to say I have no wise words. I have no template. It was extremely lucky. I don't know if it can be duplicated very often. There's something in the States, and I think there's probably coverage up in Canada now I think about it, called PrepperNet, which is kind of a match.com, not for romance, but for preppers to meet. You put in your zip code, and it says there's 7 people in your zip code or postal code. You guys have letters and numbers. It's so hard I can't do it. VCBZ. I'm like, what is that? Russian? Actually, I know what it is, Russian, but anyway, it's weird. And so people can find each other that way. And that's been a pretty helpful thing. There's a thing called American Contingency, which is done by a former U.S. Green Beret named Mike Glover, who's on episode 106 coming out tonight, by the way. We had a great conversation, and he's got a way for people in various areas to sort of meet up. So that might work for you. But the team, it's just these personalities and the differences between all of us. You would never, you would never, just seeing us like walking down the street, you would never think we're really like together. Korean dude, Mexican dude, couple white guys. I'm the oldest one. There's Scotty, who's like this fresh looking, 20 something Norwegian guy. It's like, why would these guys hang out? So the team is real. I get, that's another thing that has been a source of inspiration and kind of fuels Shelby and I. They've taken her in onto the team, and that was kind of scary. I didn't know if that would happen the way it did, and it happened really, really well, because she told them, rock and roll reference lost on younger people. Here we go. She said, I'm not going to be Yoko Ono. And she wasn't. So that was good, because Yoko Ono was a bitch. Let's be honest.
Broke up the band.
So
he broke up the band.
She actively killed John Lennon.
Yeah. So,
Well, spiritually anyway.
Yeah, it was Mark Chapman who killed him, but no, but spiritually killed him, and then he was talking crazy stuff. Anyway, so the team, I don't know if that answers your question. That's kind of a stream of consciousness about the team, but everyone needs a team. I don't know if you're going to find them like I did, but community, and it could be like grandmas. That could be your team, and that's cool. But you have to have others, because you can't do this all alone. You just can't. So you should listen to this podcast and reach out to others of like minds in your postal code. Is that what you guys call it? A postal code?
Yep.
Yeah, but our postal codes are really, really small. Like one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
One street.
They can be. It depends. Look,
And Alberta has
your
just
FSA.
one. So what's
Just
FUSA?
FSA, the first 3 digits of your postal code.
Huh?
That's a Canadian thing.
I'm sorry. I can, it sounds like English, but I don't even know what you're saying. So it's weird.
That's okay. Canadians that write letters will understand what I mean.
We're speaking of
once
grandmas. We're talking about people who write letters.
That's still a thing, right? People still write letters, maybe?
I don't know if they want to
Okay.
stay better than encryption, I suppose.
Printed, signed, dated, addressed, stamped, and mailed 475 letters in August.
Well, you weren't sending them to the government. I'm afraid to ask.
You're not a
Okay.
Nigerian Are you?
I choose to give no further information there, but I did it. It is still a thing.
That's fine. That's a lot of letters to be writing, and the only reason I know they weren't to the government is because you said you put stamps on them. We know letters to our government are free. Socialism's fun like that.
They're not free. They just don't require a stamp.
Well, free the same way that our healthcare is free. There's no charge on delivery.
Yeah, just charge up front.
Yeah,
And dying. Sorry, I've heard bad things.
I have a lot of unkind things to say about, well, basically all of our government services.
Well, free healthcare is technically free, but not good, and yeah, only costs you about 50% of your paycheck.
Yeah, not a great time. Going back to the team thing. Once you find your local grandmas that want to meet you, are there anything that we ought to be doing? Because I imagine you're not all going to be gunfighters. You're not all 6 foot tall Korean insurance gunfighters.
Can't be. What are the odds of that? Yes, diversification and different roles are key. We did 2 episodes of Prepping 2.0, and I think it's like I have an episode sheet right here. Let me see. It was like episode 20. It was episode 20. That's what it was. Episode 20, a long time ago, called The Anatomy of a Team. And we've linked up with these guys in Spokane, Washington, that are this amazing team. And we had them on and we said, you guys are doing this right. And tell me why. It was like a 2-hour show. And they describe why. So you need people with, there's 2 schools of thoughts on this. I was about to say people with different skills. That's one school of thought. But I mean, really, how are you gonna like recruit like a paramedic and I don't know, somebody, I mean, people with, like a cell phone technician or something. I mean, I think it's really hard to go out and find people with these amazing skills just because of the odds. By the way, locksmiths, good dudes to know. Very good dudes to know. Keep that in mind.
By the way, I'm a locksmith.
Are you serious?
If only we knew one.
Locksmiths are going to eat great in the collapse because everybody's going to need a locksmith. So anyway, I seriously, I didn't even know that. So that must be the L in your name. It's locksmith. But so I don't know if you can go and find people with amazing skills. I think that if you get trusted, vetted people who you can count on, the kind of people that if, you get a flat tire, you can call them at 3 a.m. and they'll come out and help you. That to me is way more important than actual skills. I mean, one of the guys we have is a recently retired special operations medic. I mean, where are you going to find that? I mean, that's just crazy. If you live by Joint Base Lewis McChord, that's how you actually find that. But so I'm a bigger fan of finding people that are just good dudes, I guess females too, obviously, who you can work with, and then you can acquire some skills. Or we have the core team and then we have the auxiliary, and the core team, as the name implies, is the core, guys. And I'm working on recruiting a locksmith actually. Not you though. You're too far away.
I know one in your area. We'll talk off air.
Okay. That's right. Good. So I think that when it comes to the skill stuff, you can either learn it or find people who can do it, because if you set out the standard of 10 Green Berets, it's not going to happen. So I hope that answers your question.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Got one other sort of related question with the team.
Okay.
Because we've recently gone through, I no longer have social media because I have been deemed unworthy by the social media gods.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm now at a loss of how to find new people to interact with, because I can't go to my local gun store because of the coronas.
Right.
I can't find people on the social media that like, click, share, and subscribe to my photos.
Mm-hmm.
So once I get my team, or maybe when I'm trying to find that team, have you got any predictions around what's going to be happening with social media and how that's going to affect people in our milieu, people that are on the, I'm going to call it the right wing. I don't think that I'm a particularly right wing person, but I'm certainly further to the right than, say, AOC. So when we start to see more of us getting deplatformed, how are preppers and the right wing and patriot people like that going to, I don't want to necessarily say coordinate, because that sounds more ominous than I think it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
But how are we going to all stay in touch with this? Because eventually I'm expecting, like, I'm not going to be able to be on YouTube someday.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I have the YouTube for now. I can get the message out that way, but I fully expect that to go like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and for me to be slowly removed from the internet to become unpersoned.
I would have had a different answer to this question last week, but it changed a lot around the US election. Last week, I would have said, gee, I don't know, because there are not a lot of really good alternative social media platforms. I mean, you can get on, I always call it, I joke around, this isn't a real thing, like get on Giraffe. It's got like 9 users, and that's not really going to accomplish what you want, right? And by the way, people always do it. They email me and they go, you got to get on, Squiggly, or these little, I don't even know what that is. I made that up too. But so a week ago, I would have said it's pretty bleak because there isn't an alternative set of social media platforms that have emerged in the US, is what I'm speaking of. Well, with the election and with a couple things, with Twitter banning the New York Post story about Hunter Biden and what appears to be indictable offenses, that was a big thing. But what really did it was the election coverage, and this is going to sound funny. You guys are going to laugh. Fox News, which so many conservatives thought was, awesome and right wing, called the Arizona too quickly for Biden. I know that sounds petty, but it's been a lot of other stuff. I'm just sort of summarizing. So everybody, and I mean everybody, went over to Parler, Parler, not the OR. See, you guys would put an OUR, right? It would be Parler or something like that. We don't do that. We just go to the ER. And we do. We kill a lot of each other in America. We go to the emergency room all the time. But no, Parler, Parler. And they had 4 million downloads in 5 days, something like that. Rumble is a great alternative, I think, and it's taken off, relatively speaking, to YouTube. Great YouTube substitute with a no censorship free thing. So now I think in the past few days, I've come to find, I've come to believe, that's probably better. I don't know if I'm right or not. I've come to believe in my mind that there are alternatives out there, and the conservative, it wasn't a migration, it was a stampede over to Parler, for example, which is a lot like Twitter. And MeWe, of course, exists, and that's had huge download numbers too. So I think conservatives have finally had enough for a variety of the previously mentioned reasons, at least conservatives in the US, and they've picked like the best platform at the time. So like Parler got really lucky. They were like the biggest alternative, like when everyone got mad, right? And everyone went over there. So I see those alternatives doing well. I just had a conversation today. We're going to be putting some of our videos, not exclusively, on a pro firearms YouTube alternative called Full 30. And so that's been a cool thing. And a friend of mine works there, and a bunch of long stories that don't matter. So I think our side has finally come up with a reason to do the uncomfortable thing of getting off of comfortable, easy social media platforms. I laughed at myself this morning. I was posting something on like 2 Parler pages, and I still go on YouTube, or not YouTube, Facebook, and go on there and post stuff and say whatever I'm saying. And I say in the first comment, oh, by the way, Facebook sucks. Join me on Parler. And I give like the Parler URL. I'm sure they'll kick me off of Facebook soon for that. We've been kicked off Facebook twice, by the way. One time we had to redo our page, and the second time Shelby groveled in like her millennial Valley girl voice that she can turn on and off whenever she wants, and got us. It's a funny story. She tells it better than me. But anyway, so we've been kicked off Facebook twice, and shadow banned, and a bunch of other stuff. So we have Prepping 2.0 on YouTube and Rumble, soon to be Full 30. And we're very active on Parler. So conservatives, I think, are going to migrate over. There may not be one big platform that everybody's on. That might be one of those things. I just had this. See, this happens when I either go on shows or have people on shows. I figure stuff out as I'm talking. In the, let's say the 80s, 70s, 80s, there was like 3 news networks. I guess you only had one, right? CBC. So there would be like one monolithic place where you got information. Well, I think up until last week, that would be Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. There was like one monolithic platform for those various types. And I think we're seeing now that there are going to be all kinds of different platforms and alternative things. And I don't need to talk to 2 million people and like see pictures of their dog or like what they had for lunch, because I don't care anymore. I mean, that's the old days. That's when I tried to get along with people, and those days are over. So I think we'll find a couple bigger platforms, congregate to them, but there'll be lots of giraffes and squiggly platforms.
All right. I'm going to register squiggly.biz right now before somebody takes it.
Squiggly.ca.
Yeah, and giraffe too. You got to get giraffe.
I probably can't afford giraffe, a one-letter dictionary word.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
But seriously, like, actually curious about that, because the YouTube monetization aspect, and most of these people getting demonetized, like, everywhere it's, James Yeager to, any pro-gun channel, basically. And I wonder if Full 30 is going to come up with some sort of monetization scheme or anything else down the road, because that would draw even more people over faster, you would think.
Yeah, I'm kind of unfamiliar with it. I understand it's a subscription-based thing. You need to, I don't know if I'm making this up, $5 a month to, have access to it. They have 7,000 creators. They have 250,000 users, mostly gun guys. The Firearms Radio Network, which is kind of a big podcasting deal, at least in the US, has like a couple dozen shows, really good shows on that network. They're on Full 30. So see, it's kind of taken off with the gun world, but we're going to have the gun world, and we're going to have like, I was going to say like parakeet, owners, but see, parakeet owners can go on YouTube and show pictures of their parakeets. It's only really us that need to like,
it's parakeet owners with machine guns that are the problem.
Yeah. We probably have that in the US. Yeah, we probably do.
Yeah. Color me
Murder
jealous.
hornets with guns.
With a parakeet with a free stamp gun, and I'm standing here looking to see if they are I can't use.
So it'll be different. We'll do social media differently, and I don't think we all need to be on Facebook. We don't all need to be on YouTube. We're going to have to do a little bit more work and be on different platforms. Cool. It's better than being censored. What Twitter did in the U.S. presidential election with that New York Post story was unconscionable. It had a huge effect, and I'll never be okay with that. I'm permanently mad at Twitter and the whole big tech thing. It's awful.
Well, you knew Fox was going downhill the minute they had Donna Brazil on there, and I think it was 2 minutes after the polls closed, they called Arizona.
Yeah, it was 20 minutes, but it felt like 2 minutes. It was horrible.
Yeah, it's a little much.
Well, let me ask you this: with all of your newfound social media and the places you've been shadow banned, if people want to follow your work or get your books or listen to your show, where should they go to look for you on the internet?
The one-stop place would be prepping2-0.com, prepping2-0.com. The books are available at 299days.com. Shelby's books, which are awesome, at agreatstate.com. We're on Parler, as I mentioned. I'm at Glen Tate and at prepping 2.0. Shelby's on there on Parler. Shelby Gallagher, and we're on YouTube and iTunes and Stitcher and Podbean and all that stuff. We're on Rumble, and it's prepping 2 point spelled out 0, but it's all on the homepage of prepping2-0.com, and you can find all the ways to connect with us. And we'd love to have you as listeners. It's free on Prepping 2.0. We'd love to have you come try it out. See if it's your cup of tea.
There you go. I'm actually a Prepping 2.0 listener. Something I usually have on when I walk the dogs.
Thank you.
It's on my iTunes as well. So
awesome.
Well, no, I was
Thank you.
oh man, Glen's got a new thing, because I think I've listened to every interview that you've done. So hopefully nobody's bored of me asking the same good questions that I stole from other podcasts. Thanks, Gun Dudes.
Love the Gun Dudes. I miss those guys.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Me too. But hopefully I haven't stolen too much material from other people. But I saw that you had the podcast, and I've been listening since episode 1. I'm not going to say I'm your first download there, but I've something to listen to while I walk the dogs.
Thank you. Seriously,
than what we get up here.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Well, it's the different perspectives thing. You'll also be sad to know that I occasionally listen to NPR.
Doesn't bug me.
It bugs me some days.
I wish I had an NPR voice. You're listening to NPR. I can't do that. It's the mockery.
Yeah, a different microphone.
I have to sever a certain organ of my body. Whoa, did I just say that? Yes, I did.
Yes, that's the trick.
Mm-hmm. What do you guys call that in Canada? The woohoo? No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to ask you to answer that.
Is there anything else that we left out that you wanted to cover other than the woohoo?
One brief thing I'll mention is that I talk about Canada in 299 days. In book 10, it's called The 43 Colonels, and it's a profile of 43 people who were given honorary colonelships by the state of New Washington because they did awesome stuff in the fight that takes place in Washington State. And one of them is the ambassador, Jeff Aylesworth, who is the Washington State ambassador to Canada. Let that sink in. And in it, I describe what I foresee happening in Canada with a collapse and then a big kind of trading post thing and cross-border traffic and Canadians being really cool and not getting hung up in American politics and basically treating everybody on both sides of the American side well. And so I think Canadians might find that interesting to see an American's perspective on how Canada and America would intersect and operate together in a collapse of both countries. So I commend that if you're interested.
Right on. I think we're gonna have to add Glen's books to book club. I know that they're in the catalog for our book club. We do once a month we do a book review.
Oh, cool.
This month we're gonna be doing 12 Rules for Life and Antidote to Chaos by Jordan Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a copy yet, you're probably not going to be able to read along with us at the end of the month because it is a big book.
Definitely not. It's a 2-month commitment, bare minimum.
But I know that younger Andrew, I think had put 299 days in the reading list for a future book club. So now that we've had Glen on, we might need to get Glen back on, cover one of his books.
We refer to him as better Andrew.
No, younger Andrew.
Younger is often better.
He refers to himself as better Andrew.
Yeah, well, he's not here tonight, so we'll just carry on. If you're using our Amazon links to buy your copies of books, and I think you can get 299 days on Amazon, right?
Absolutely.
So I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. If you're using our Amazon affiliate links, we get a small portion of that revenue because that's how affiliate links work. So if you buy anything on Amazon after you click the link, I appreciate that. Last month, our affiliate revenue paid for my son's diapers, which was great because he has only recently discovered the potty, and I still think we're going to be buying diapers for quite a while. Not good at the potty yet, but we've at least discovered what it is.
I'm still working on it.
Yeah, well, me too. Depends on how much I've had to drink, though. Some days are better than others. We'll go around. Alan, where can everybody find you on the internet?
I am mostly an internet ghost. You can find me by email, Alan, that's with one L, at prepperpodcast.ca, or occasionally on Instagram at PPSWO. Every once in a while, I find new and interesting things to put there.
Good stuff. Ian, where can everybody find you?
You can reach me by email at theislandretreat@gmail.com. You can also find me with Alan on Sunday evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Canadian Prepper Podcast on iTunes and YouTube and Facebook.
All right. Glen, I know you've got all of the social media. Do you want to plug some of the important ones again there?
No, just go to prepping2-0.com and they're all listed there, and find one you're either on or want to be on, and boom, go from there.
There we go. Prepping2-0.com for Glen. If you've listened to the show this long, you deserve a discount code. Go to ragnaroktactical.ca. Use the discount code Patriot at checkout. Save yourself some money on tactical gear, medical supplies, all that good stuff. And as always, $10 flat rate shipping. If you want to send in some feedback for the show, feedback at CanadianPatriotPodcast.com. Let us know who your favorite author is and ask them if they can come on my podcast. That's right. Get Glen back on. Send us more mail. Tell us you want more Glen. We need more Glen in your day. I have to apologize to Rod Giltaca. When Rod writes 10 books, Rod will be allowed back on the show.
That's pretty
Seems
rude.
Fair. Seems fair.
Oh, I'm rude to Rod every week. For all of our listeners out there in podcast land, I would like to remind you that you are the